Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi anda bersama saya Harits Asyraf. Kita mulakan niaga awani dengan laporan berikut. Kerajaan akan melaksanakan Kerangka Insentif Baharu NIF berkuat kuasa 1 Mac 2026 bermula dengan sektor perkilangan dan diikuti oleh sektor perkhidmatan pada suku kedua 2026. Menurut Kementerian Pelaburan Perdagangan dan Industri MITI, pelaksanaan kerangka baharu itu menandakan anjakan dasar strategik yang ketara dalam lanskap insentif pelaburan Malaysia.
MITI dalam satu kenyataan pada Khamis berkata, insentif itu bertujuan memastikan negara kekal kompetitif, mampan dan berdaya tahan dalam menghadapi cabaran ekonomi global. NIF juga bertujuan mengukuhkan daya tahan ekonomi Malaysia dengan mengaitkan pemberian insentif kepada pencapaian hasil yang spesifik sejajar keutamaan strategik negara. Menurutnya, kerangka ini mengguna pakai pendekatan berperingkat dan berasaskan hasil yang selari dengan aspirasi dasar ekonomi dan perindustrian negara. Pelaksanaannya berpandukan kepada dua strategi utama negara iaitu Dasar Pelaburan Baharu berteraskan Aspirasi Pelaburan Nasional NIA dan Pelan Induk Perindustrian Baharu 2030 NIMP 2030. Oleh itu, seiring dengan pelaksanaan NIF, MITI berkata kerajaan tidak lagi menerima permohonan baru insentif untuk sektor perkilangan di bawah Akta Penggalakan Pelaburan 1986. Tarikh akhir bagi mengemukakan permohonan insentif di bawah PIA 1986 untuk sektor perkilangan adalah pada 28 Februari 2026 pukul 3 petang. Bagaimanapun, syarikat yang sudah menerima kelulusan dan sedang menikmati insentif di bawah PIA 1986 tidak akan terjejas dan kelulusan sedia ada akan terus berkuat kuasa mengikut terma serta syarat yang sudah ditetapkan. Bagi memastikan objektif NIF dicapai dengan berkesan, kad skor NIA akan digunakan sebagai mekanisme penilaian komprehensif untuk mengukur kesan dan hasil pelaburan berdasarkan keutamaan nasional yang telah ditetapkan. Sementara itu, kementerian tersebut berkata, kerajaan menawarkan dua jenis insentif cukai utama di bawah NIF yang bersifat saling eksklusif dan pemohon perlu memilih salah satu insentif bagi setiap projek yang layak. Ia terdiri daripada kadar cukai khas istimewa bagi tempoh yang ditetapkan dan elang cukai pelaburan berdasarkan peratusan perbelanjaan modal yang layak.
Okey, baik. Semalam kita menyaksikan Fed, Reserve Persekutuan Amerika Syarikat mengekalkan kadar faedahnya. Jadi sudah tentu akan ada impak kepada ekonomi, mata wang dan sebagainya. Jadi untuk mengulas lanjut bersama saya secara dalam talian, Abdul Muiz Murhalim, pakar ekonomi MBSB Research. Muiz, pertama sekali kita lihat Fed mengekalkan 3.5 hingga 3.75. Jangkaan pasaran juga begitu. Dalam keputusan semalam ini, apa mungkin faktor yang menjadi pertimbangan Fed untuk tidak mengubah dasar monitorinya, Muiz?
Okey. Kalau kita lihat dari segi keputusan yang dibuat Fed ni memang rata-rata menepati jangkaan pasaran kerana pasaran meletakkan kebarangkalian lebih 90% kemungkinan Fed tidak akan membuat sebarang perubahan. Ini mengambil kira dua faktor utama. Pertama ialah kedudukan ekonomi ataupun khususnya melibat kepada keadaan dalam pasaran buruh, dan yang kedua adalah tekanan inflasi. Tapi bila kita lihat dari segi mesej yang disampaikan oleh Fed, mereka mengatakan risiko mengenai kenaikan inflasi yang lebih tertumpu kepada kerisauan kenaikan tarif mungkin akan menyebabkan tekanan harga lebih tinggi adalah nampaknya lebih rendah. Kerana kita dapati pergerakan harga ataupun inflasi tidak berlaku peningkatan yang mendadak. Dan kedua, kita lihat dari segi kestabilan, tanda-tanda kestabilan dalam pasaran buruh menyebabkan tiada kebimbangan yang lebih mengenai risiko akan berlakunya kelemahan yang lebih besar dalam pasaran buruh. Jadi melihat kepada keseimbangan dari segi tekanan kedua-dua mandat yang perlu ditekankan oleh Fed ini menyebabkan tiada tekanan yang besar untuk Fed melakukan sebarang perubahan. Jadi ini adalah menepati apa yang dijangka oleh pasaran. Cuma pada saya adalah satu perkara yang baik bila kita lihat dari segi rumusan mengenai ekonomi, yang mana Fed menyatakan keadaan ekonomi di Amerika Syarikat nampaknya berada dalam keadaan lebih baik, lebih solid, lebih konsisten dan stabil berbanding rumusan yang lebih sederhana yang dibuat pada bulan sebelumnya.
Ya, Muiz, saya nak bawa perbincangan kita melihat kepada isu credibility Fed itu sendiri. Kita lihat tekanan demi tekanan diterima oleh Fed dari White House lah, secara khususnya kalau kita lihat juga berkait isu ubah suai, renovation Fed. Ada apa sebenarnya? Adakah ini memberi ataupun menjejaskan keyakinan terhadap Fed sebagai sebuah bank pusat yang bebas, dan mungkin pandangan Muiz sendiri, pengurusi Fed yang baru yang akan gantikan Jerome Powell dijangka pada Mei nanti mampu mengekalkan integriti kebebasan Fed itu sendiri?
Okey. Ni isu mengenai kebebasan bank pusat ni memang menjadi satu perkara yang dibincangkan kerana kita lihat dari segi tekanan yang dibuat oleh kerajaan pimpinan Donald Trump secara terbukanya meminta Fed untuk menurunkan lagi kadar faedah. Dan benar bila kita lihat dari segi tindakan undang-undang ke atas Jerome Powell itu adalah antara tekanan terbaru yang dibuat bagi mengenakan tekanan supaya Jerome Powell ataupun Fed secara umumnya bersetuju untuk menurunkan lagi kadar faedah. Walau kita lihat dari segi tempoh kontrak Jerome Powell pun tidaklah begitu lama, hanya akan diganti dalam pada bulan Mei nanti. Tetapi kita lihat tekanan ini terus berterusan. Dan bagi saya percaya isu ini akan terus berlanjutan sehinggalah pengurusi Fed yang baru diumumkan nanti. Ada jangkaan calon baru akan diumumkan pada minggu hadapan. Tapi saya menjangkakan ataupun kebanyakan pendapat di pasaran menjangkakan pengurusi baru ini mungkin nampaknya adalah seorang calon yang lebih kepada pro-Trump dan kemungkinan besar akan bersetuju untuk terus menurunkan kadar faedah. Yang mana ini adalah satu agenda pada saya untuk memberi satu gambaran baik kepada pentadbiran Trump kerana memberi sokongan yang lebih kepada ekonomi. Namun dari segi integriti dan kebebasan ini saya lebih bersetuju pendapat yang dinyatakan oleh Jerome Powell sendiri, yang mana tidak perlu ada tekanan politik kerana keputusan untuk menetapkan kadar faedah adalah lebih tertumpu kepada keadaan ekonomi mahupun kedudukan di pasaran kewangan. Sebaliknya, sekira tekanan politik yang dibuat contohnya menurunkan kadar faedah itu pada paras yang berlebihan, mungkin ini akan menyebabkan berlakunya tekanan inflasi yang luar jangka, yang mana ini mungkin berisiko untuk menjejaskan keadaan kestabilan ekonomi di masa akan datang. Walaupun ini bagus untuk politik, tetapi ini bukanlah satu keputusan yang baik untuk ekonomi untuk jangka panjang. Jadi sebab itu pada saya merasakan perlunya ada usaha untuk memastikan integriti dan kebebasan bank pusat ini dikekalkan.
Ya, Muiz mungkin juga melihat kepada keputusan Fed dan juga kredibiliti Fed itu sendiri. Bagaimana ini sebenarnya memberi kesan kepada nilai dolar Amerika yang mungkin sedikit sebanyak nampaknya jatuh dan juga melemah, walaupun kita lihat ekonomi Amerika Syarikat itu berada dalam kedudukan yang lebih baik. Adakah ini mungkin bermakna keyakinan ke atas dolar ni semakin luntur, dan mungkin apa trend ini akan berterusan selepas ini, Muiz?
Okey, memang satu sudut bila kita sebut tentang credibility ini turut sama memberi kesan kepada keyakinan dari segi perubahan nilai dolar. Kerana kebiasaan waktu, kalau kita lihat sepanjang bulan ini banyak isu-isu mengenai geopolitik yang berlaku seperti ketegangan antara Amerika Syarikat dan Iran, dan terbaru kita lihat dari segi tekanan Amerika untuk mendapatkan kawalan ke atas Greenland yang mana ianya berada di bawah pentadbiran Denmark. Dan isu ketegangan antara Amerika dan Denmark ini juga menyebabkan lebih banyak tekanan ataupun ketegangan yang berlaku antara Amerika dan seterunya lain di Eropah. Dan kita lihat kebiasaan waktu, kalau kita tengok kesan dari segi perubahan ataupun geopolitik yang berlaku di Timur Tengah, terdapat peningkatan permintaan dolar disebabkan kebimbangan kemungkinan berlakunya ketidakstabilan ekonomi. Namun sebaliknya, bila kita lihat dari segi isu melibatkan Greenland ini, situasinya berbeza. Peningkatan tegangan geopolitik dengan Eropah ini menyebabkan nilai dolar nampaknya menurun kerana kita dapati terdapat juga ugutan daripada Denmark dan juga mungkin negara Eropah untuk mengurangkan pegangan kertas perbendaharaan Amerika Syarikat kerana satu sudut mereka menyatakan mungkin nilainya tidaklah begitu tinggi kerana risau dengan keadaan ekonomi. Namun sebaliknya kita lihat ini adalah satu tindakan protes kerana tekanan yang dibuat oleh Amerika Syarikat untuk mendapatkan kawalan ke atas Greenland. Walaupun ketegangan mengenai Greenland ini nampaknya lebih reda kerana Trump mengatakan satu framework telah dipersetujui dan tindakan untuk mengenakan tarif baru ke atas Eropah tidak perlu diteruskan. Tapi kita lihat nilai dolar terus menurun dan kita dapati contohnya pada pertengahan bulan Januari ia berada dalam sekitar 97 berdasarkan kepada DXY Dollar Index dan ianya terus menurun ke sekitar 96 pada hujung bulan ini. Dan saya percaya kalau kita melihat dari segi ketidaktentuan ataupun kebimbangan mengenai tindakan-tindakan yang dibuat oleh kerajaan Amerika Syarikat ini, kemungkinan keyakinan ke atas dolar ini mungkin akan terus berkurang, dan kita dapati semakin banyak usaha-usaha di kalangan negara-negara lain untuk membina satu hubungan ekonomi dan perdagangan yang baru bagi mengelakkan kesan negatif dari tekanan yang dibuat oleh Amerika Syarikat.
Ya, Muiz, ini mungkin soalan terakhir berbaki lebih kurang dalam 2 minit perbincangan kita ini. Melihat kepada ringgit pula, kita lihat semalam kalau kita lihat tukaran asing sekitar dalam 392. Adakah ini kita akan lihat bawah ataupun melepasi paras 390 ataupun adakah ini juga kita akan melihat prestasi ringgit yang lebih memberangsangkan, dan juga apa faktor sebenarnya awal tahun ni kita nampak ringgit sangat kukuh ini, Muiz?
Okey. Yang tadi saya jelaskan apa yang berlaku tu, kelemahan dolar tu banyak terkesan dari segi perubahan geopolitik. Tetapi bila kita lihat sebenarnya pengukuhan nilai ringgit ni adalah menunjukkan keyakinan yang lebih baik ke atas kedudukan ekonomi negara, dan juga kita tengok dari segi fundamental Malaysia, ekonomi Malaysia yang baik. Kerana kita dapati walaupun ringgit mengukuh sekitar 3.3% kepada dolar Amerika Syarikat, ianya turut mengukuh sekitar 3 ke 5% berbanding nilai mata wang negara-negara dagangan utama seperti Taiwan, Indonesia dan juga Filipina. Yang mana kita dapati ini adalah satu keyakinan yang mana aliran masuk ini menunjukkan lebih banyak keyakinan melihat kepada keadaan pertumbuhan ekonomi yang baik, kestabilan dari segi inflasi, dan ini memberi keyakinan kemungkinan ringgit akan terus mengukuh. Kami pada asalnya menjangka hanya akan mencecah RM3.95 pada hujung tahun ini. Tapi saya percaya mungkin paras 3.90 ini mungkin akan mampu dicecah dalam masa terdekat. Kerana kita dapati sekiranya dolar terus melemah dan fundamental ekonomi Malaysia nampaknya lebih baik, mungkin kita akan lihat lebih banyak aliran masuk yang akan terus menyokong pengukuhan nilai ringgit.
Ya, Muiz, mungkin kita dapat melihat juga mungkin dalam 385, 387 mungkin dalam sebulan dua ini. Terima kasih saudara Abdul Muiz Murhalim, pakar ekonomi MBSB Research, berkomen berkenaan dengan keputusan Fed, kadar Amerika Syarikat ataupun kadar mata wang dolar serta keadaan ringgit pada ketika ini. Dan niaga awani, kita nak berhenti rehat seketika. Selepas ini ada laporan dari WF serta niaga spotlight jam 10 pagi nanti.
Herbal Essences melembutkan dan menyelatkan semula rambut anda dengan 100% pati tumbuhan sebenar seperti minyak argan dan aloe. Menutrisi secara mendalam untuk rambut lembut dan berkilat semula, bebas daripada paraben, parafin dan pewarna. Herbal Essences.
Kementerian Pendidikan bertanggungjawab sepenuhnya terhadap keselamatan murid dan pelajar sewaktu mereka di sekolah.
Malaysia dan Korea Selatan terus memperkukuh kerjasama dalam bidang teknologi hijau dan kecerdasan buatan AI menerusi pelaburan dua syarikat utama Republik itu.
SPRM akan meneliti dan menjalankan siasatan sekiranya terdapat unsur rasuah dalam pelaksanaan projek Aerotrain di KLIA yang dilaporkan sering mengalami gangguan perkhidmatan.
Terima kasih atas kemenangan ini. Kami ingin merakamkan penghargaan kepada semua pelanggan Astro dengan tontonan komplimentari saluran ini dari 26 Januari hingga 4 Februari. Terima kasih kerana menyokong kami.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our panel today on scaling AI. Now comes the hard part. This is part of the World Economic Forum's AI Transformation of Industries initiative. With $1.5 trillion in investment in 2025, the race to capture the full economic impact of AI is on. But scaling beyond pilots remains a major hurdle for many, many businesses. It requires new strategies, new capabilities. We've got a great panel today who's going to talk about that. Joining me, Roy Jacobs, President and Chief Executive Officer of Royal Philips, Ryan McInerney, Chief Executive Officer of Visa, Amin Nasser, President and Chief Executive Officer of Aramco, and Julie Sweet, Chair and Chief Executive Officer of Accenture. But before I start in with questions for you, I've got a question for the audience. How many people out here have launched a pilot program, an AI pilot program in your organization? Can I just see a show of hands from people who have? That's most of the people in the room. That's definitely most people. And then if you have been able to scale those up, let me see those hands again. A lot fewer, but more than I would have expected. Okay. That's about what I thought. And then one more, just for those of you who have scaled up, how many of you ran into unexpected challenges? Same number. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit today about scaling up AI, and I'm going to start off by a lot happens every year. Seems like every year is 10 years in AI years. And I'm wondering what's possible with AI in 2026 that wasn't possible a year or two ago. And Roy, I think we'll start with you, and maybe I'll ask that question about healthcare. Are there, clinical, operational improvements that you've seen due to AI that it's enabled in the past year or so?
Yeah, I think actually AI in healthcare is going really fast. I think the need is urgent because we just don't have enough people to take care of patients and people that need care. And therefore, I think the use of AI is finding its way and is finding its way to improve clinical outcomes. For example, how can it help with better diagnosing a patient when you take an image, when you actually measure people through a monitor? How can you do better decision support for clinical interventions to make them more accurate, to prevent any mistakes to be made? So actually augment the clinician with very fast and accurate data to support them in their daily work. And then there's a big piece which is also about operational improvement, because there's a huge admin burden in healthcare, and how can you actually take away some of those steps that nurses, technicians, doctors have to take that they really don't want to spend their time on. And that's actually automating some of the workflow of the care pathways, and that's where we see rapid improvement. For example, if you do ambience listening in a patient room, you don't have to actually have the clinician taking notes. It actually can be recorded at once. And then actually they can sign off the transcript, and then actually they can move on in their job. If a nurse that actually spends 15 to 20 minutes, an hour on admin tasks can be relieved by 10 or 15 minutes of that, she or he can spend that time on the patient. So I think there's real meaningful progress, and you see rapid adoption as a result in healthcare of AI.
I like this example of the nurse, because that's a concrete outcome that's good for the patient, right? That's not just something that's good for the business; it's good for everybody. Is that the way you view it?
Yeah, I think so. We also describe it as how can you give time back to the practice, right? In healthcare, it's all about how do you care better about the patient. The clinician wants to spend more quality time in also having the conversation, having the kind of the aftercare from when you have a diagnosis, not only the hard fact of this is what you have, but also what does it mean, and how are we going to treat you? And the same with a nurse that wants to have actually quality time with the patient. On average, it's 5 to 7 minutes or 3 minutes that they can spend time. That's not a lot of time. And actually patients need better quality time for them. And that's where we can give time back, and AI and agents can give time back. So it's a different notion of you also improve productivity, you also improve clinical outcomes, but there's also really a quality aspect in giving something back to care that actually we have been missing, or that has become under bigger pressure because we just don't have enough people to do the job.
And do you go ahead, Julie?
I would say Roy's point is really important, because I think one of the things we really learned is that we started a conversation around AI that was so focused on productivity and not actually the full outcome. So in a related industry in pharma, we're seeing the same thing where one of the biggest things when you take drugs to market is you have to comply all of the content to explain the drugs to physicians. You have to comply with lots of, regulations around the world. Most pharma companies have a lot of different, processes for that. And so we are working with a pharma company where we standardize the processes. We now have content. They can do what took months to days, so they're able to get to market more quickly. But actually, the most interesting insight was that the people who used to spend time saying, how do I get legal approval, are now spending time saying, who needs this? Was the content helpful? Because before, if once you got it approved, the last thing you wanted to do was update the content, and go through the same approval process. And so much like the patient outcome, they're spending more time thinking about how to get the drug to the right places, make sure they understand it, which of course helps revenue, but it's really helping patients. And there are many examples of that across the globe in different industries and different things where it's not just productivity. And in fact, our latest survey just this last quarter, 78% of the C-suite believe that AI is actually helping growth more than productivity, like in terms of like the value of it. So I think it's a really important part, and that's a learning over the last 12 months as you've started to see a lot of these things begin to scale.
Thank you. Ryan, I'm curious about agentic commerce. We've been hearing about it for a long time. It seems like 2026 is the year that's actually really going to take off, or people are predicting it. And I'm wondering what you're seeing as sort of the next big frontier there. What are the challenges that you see coming with implementing that?
So I think last year, most users, most consumers started to use these platforms and these AIs to shop for things, for discovery, to look for, move off of maybe one of the search platforms or the commerce platforms. But then when they actually went to buy something, they went to the native merchant seller site. This year, in 2026, I think most of us will continue to shop on our AI platform of choice, but now we'll be able to buy natively on the platform. The buy button will be there. I won't need to leave, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Copilot or what have you. I think as we start to emerge from 2026 and look beyond, that's when you'll start to see a shift of real agentic commerce. Not just me pressing the buy button on one of these platforms, but me empowering an agent on my behalf to go shop for something, find it, and then buy it on my behalf. But for that to work, to your question, we need to invest in trust. You need to trust your agent that they're not going to go crazy and buy something you don't want to buy or spend more money than you want to spend. Merchants need to trust that if an agent is showing up, at their digital doorstep, that it's actually there on your behalf and you've empowered it. And your bank needs to trust that when they get a request to authorize a transaction on your behalf, that you really wanted that to happen. So for that all to happen, we are deploying AI-ready cards, AI-ready Visa cards around the world that empower users to set the parameters so that they'll trust their agent. How much money can you spend? What's the size of the transaction? Where can you go buy? For how long do I want that open to buy to exist? Things like that. We've rolled out a trusted agent protocol so that a merchant knows that if an agent is showing up on my behalf with a Visa card, that it's a real one, with a real card that's actually being empowered with the data payloads that I just described. And that finally, we've rolled out a level of personalization so that all of us as Visa card holders, if we choose, can empower our agent to look at our shopping history on my Visa cards and use that to personalize recommendations and shopping experiences and user journeys and those types of things. So I think we're on the brink of something that is going to be very powerful. I think it's going to be a great time to be a consumer. Shopping is going to be easier, it's going to be more secure, it's going to be more fun, it's going to be more efficient, and I think it's going to ultimately grow commerce and be a great thing for merchants around the world.
Can I follow up a little bit on that last bit? When you're talking about having an agent sort of understand my purchasing history and transacting on my behalf, so would this be something like it understands what I'm shopping for at the grocery store on a weekly basis or a monthly basis and goes out and does that for me? It understands that, yes, it's winter time and I'm starting to need a new coat. Like how far do you envision this going?
Yeah, I think the collective data of your shopping history on your Visa card over time is very powerful. But historically, we haven't had the tools and the surfaces to allow users to put that shopping history to work in a way that's very empowering for the user. So imagine a world going forward where, for example, you go to your bank and you're able to empower your agent via your bank to leverage your shopping history to tailor those purchases. What time of year do you make travel purchases? Yeah. What are the type of restaurant purchases that you make? That allows, again, your agent to have much more context than what they're able to do from your normal user profile.
Amin, you were on a similar panel last year, and I'm curious, compared to this time last year where you've seen the most meaningful change in what AI can support across your energy operations.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, last year, I talked about 400 use cases that we came up with in Saudi Aramco. This year, we're talking about 500 use cases. 100 use cases went from the pilots to actual deployments. We measure our progress in terms of what we call a technology realized value every year. And, you know, we used to have like $200 to $300 million in the previous years in terms of technology realized value. In 23 and 24, we achieved $6 billion. 50% of that is AI related. 25, we should publish our numbers next month after we finish the third-party verification. And we're looking at $3 to $5 billion. Also, more than 50% is AI related. We've seen the benefits of the huge infrastructure that we have built over 90 years, the 6,000 talents that we trained on AI. These are the subject matter experts that come up with the use cases. It's not the data analysts. We have a couple of hundreds of these. But it is the subject matter expert who understand where are the, create a pipeline for the opportunities. And the most important thing is we established the operation model, basically capitalizing on our digital company. We created a digital company and the AI Center of Excellence, which established the pathway for taking ideas from the front lines to full piloting and then full deployment. Establishing the processes and taking it into account helped a lot in creating the pipeline. Now, the pipeline keeps increasing year on year. We were looking at $2 to $4 billion a year. Now the team is asking for a much bigger target, considering the pipeline of the opportunities. So I think the development, the training, we found out that we can scale much quickly. And now the next step is working with the hyperscaler. It's how do we commercialize these outside Saudi Aramco to the market? Because this is very important and has a significant impact. Everybody talks about AI, the impact of AI, but where is the value? Where is in dollar figures? And this is what we are able to establish. We want to turn the energy sector to be more intelligent in terms of capitalizing on AI. And we have the applications and the talents and the infrastructure. And the most important things in all of these is the data quality. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have the data quality, and we have built data quality over 90 years, we kept everything because we had the infrastructure that allowed us to scale now and be at this level. Another important element that also helped in all of this is we have a venture capital arm. That venture capital arm have more than $7.5 billion, approximately $7.5 billion for investment. It find a lot of startups across the world. These startups, they want the injection of funds, but the most important thing is for them to pilot and scale their technology. And this is what we offer, not only funding, but we can scout for good technologies, a lot of it AI related, and then help funding it and piloting it and scaling it up. And this has really helped a lot. Without the venture capital, we could not scout around the world for a lot of opportunities and ideas.
Can you talk at all specifically about where you found some of these savings, where you found some of this, you know, the $3 to $5 billion you're talking about?
Okay, a lot of the savings, see, upstream is a high cost, but the opportunities is huge. For example, if we use AI in increasing productivity in the subsurface, we have what we call the intelligent earth model. We can basically increase the productive zone in a state of, we used to have over 80%. Now we have over 90% of the productive zone. Capitalizing on AI, we run in life while we are geosteering the drill bits underground, the intelligent earth model to understand where is the productive zone will be, and we place our wells. Increase the productivity in some wells by 30 to 40%. That is a huge. It's impact not only your cost, it impact also your emissions and how much you are emitting because you need less wells. I talked last year about corrosion. It's a $3 trillion market. And it helped us a lot using AI to reduce the amount of corrosion inhibitor, the amount of pipeline failures, increased our reliability. If you look at AI use in equipment reliability and predicting failures and predicting when we need to take an equipment out of the service before it have a catastrophic failures, huge benefits in reducing downtime and increasing operation efficiency of our equipments. If you look at pipelines in terms of inspections and how much we can save you to capitalizing on AI, a lot of, in downstream, which is not as big as upstream, we created a system where it allows us to increase margin by looking at columns and maximizing the yield out of a column. Instead of waiting for a console operator to make a decision, you can make the decisions in minutes and seconds now and change the yield. So there is a lot of opportunities that helped us, but each of them is treated like a project with a timeline, deliverable, and the impact. And this is what is important. This is where we were able to scale because we can see the benefits and we can prioritize every use case before we take it from pilot to deployment and see the real value. And when I mentioned the billions, we didn't even keep it for our team to decide this is how much we brought third party. They finished their work. As I said, hopefully next month they will give us the report on each item and how much is the saving that is AI related, that is digital related, or is it captured right or it's not captured right. So the real value is, and of course the most important thing, you need to reward the people and recognizing them for all of these achievements. And this is where the pipeline now is. We just have to prioritize which one that we can take it to a pilot and to a deployment, because the number of ideas that came from these 6,000 that we trained is endless.
So I'm noticing a commonality here across all three of you, which is that there is this real focus on outcomes that you mentioned versus, just sort of analyzing data and trying to find efficiencies where you can. It's interesting. Julie, you've got a unique view that's broad across many companies. And I'm curious, since last year, what would you say has changed the most in how Accenture and the large organizations that you work with are deploying AI at scale?
Well, there's a lot of insights actually in what Amin just said in terms of, where are we now in terms of scaling? Because there's scaling projects, like an individual one, and then there's scale really across the enterprise. And so Aramco is a great example of being able to scale across the company, not only just a few projects. And if you think about what Amin just said, and you sort of extract that to industries, what we're helping clients do, and I've got to see a lot of this firsthand with Aramco in terms of the discipline and what they do, is that first of all, they have the right technology stack. And so AI has been a catalyst for companies to really look at their technology. Aramco couldn't do what they did if they hadn't been investing for years, right? And so the ability to look at the tech stack and say, what do I really have to do? And to do that at scale. Data has been something that's super expensive that for years people haven't wanted to do, and the companies that have done it early, like Aramco, think about a McDonald's, who created their data foundation very early, and now they're surging ahead in how they're using it. So, but in addition, it's also about the operating model and the processes, which is what you also just heard. And so now we're working with a lot of clients who are saying, we have to really rethink, move from a project to how do we have to operate, how do we have to have our operations? And then the biggest, one of the biggest barriers to scale has been the lack of discipline or willingness to say, I have to get a value on this. I have to be able to see it in my P&L. I have to be able to embed it in the objectives of my leaders. All of these are like best practices where, as companies have said, this is real, I've seen the value, I really want to move ahead with that. And those are major transformations depending on where you start. And then when you think about what Ryan said, every place, every industry has battles that they must win. So your best examples, were all in your core operations, subsurface, right? It's not you're doing plenty in the corporate functions, but that's not where the real value is coming, right? If you're a consumer goods or retail, agentic commerce is a must-win battle right now. It's a brand new channel. It's rapidly evolving. It may be early because you can't yet buy a ton in that way, but it's going to move fast. And so companies are looking at and saying, in many cases, there's a huge opportunity before you get to advanced AI, right? Processes that aren't standardized, too many spans and layers. But there are also must-win battles. And so there's much more sophistication now and really not talking about AI, but going back to basics. What's my strategy? Are the bases of competition in my industry changing? And if so, I've got to focus there while I build out the foundation.
All three of these companies that sitting here to the left, or gentlemen sitting to your left, have these rich data sets that they're able to, to dig into and look for places where they can, find value. What do you say to companies that are maybe newer, that don't have those, or that what's the challenge for a company that doesn't have that rich data set?
Well, keep in mind, the stats are pretty stark. Over 90% of the data work that companies have to do when you look across the globe is still to come. Okay, so we have to get very realistic about where we are. And of course, the technology itself needs to continue to evolve. And so on the data foundation, though, it's not optional, but it's also, there's brand new ways using AI to build a data foundation. But that work has to be done in order to scale. And so when people say, why aren't things scaling across the enterprise, you have to have the data, right? So, but there's new ways to do it. And we are working with companies who are, building up, creating investment capacity by doing what I said, like not, focusing on the basics. I mean, things like fragmented processes, too many spans and layers in management, like, too many people. Those are things that everyone could have been addressing over the last decade, and many companies have, right? But that's a big opportunity today to make sure you're doing that, to create the investment capacity to help fund this. And we're working with many companies where it's it's two speeds, like you get the foundation in place, make sure you're using the technology you have, the AI that's already built there, and then focus on where you need to have the data in the must-win battles.
Ryan, I'm going to come back to you, if you don't mind. I'm curious about agentic commerce, and I'm wondering what kind of opportunities that's going to create for global payment systems that don't exist right now.
Well, I think Julie talked about must-wins. For Visa, agentic commerce is a must-win. If you think kind of over the arc of time, like when e-commerce first happened, Visa was a huge part of making that happen. Then you saw the rise of mobile commerce, and we put in place standards technology to make that happen. And now we see this kind of agentic commerce as this big third wave of digital commerce that will happen around the world. I think it's going to be an opportunity for a lot of different players to innovate. But you come back to this notion of truly scaling AI, that's where we can play a unique role. We have 5 billion Visa cards around the world. We have 175 million sellers on our platform. We now have 13 or 14 billion Visa tokens in the digital ecosystem. That's the kind of the basis or the platform on which we build this. And I think most people in the audience traveled here on Saturday or Sunday. They came up here to Davos. They didn't think about kind of how they were going to pay for stuff when they got here. They knew that they had a Visa card in their wallet, purse, or phone. They knew that it would work when they got here. And as they walk down the promenade and buy a coffee or a gift to bring home, they know that transaction is going to work, and so does the seller. They trust from people from all different types of countries around the world. That's the type of scale that we're trying to put in place with agentic commerce in 200 countries and territories around the world. And you ask about the opportunities. I have a thesis that agentic commerce could be an amazing leveler and empowerer for small businesses around the world. Today, most of our commerce happens as users on a small number of commerce platforms or search platforms. I believe once we all are using agents in the way that I described earlier to go search the world's inventory to find the right item for my wife's birthday, the right price for that maybe airplane ticket that I want to take or the right combination of features that I'm looking for, you have small businesses all around the world that have the ability to make their inventory available, to make their services available. And, I think there's a real chance that this third wave of digital commerce, this wave of agentic commerce, will empower small businesses to grow significantly. Small businesses in countries around the world I might not have found. A small business around the corner from where I live in my town in Northern California that I might not thought of to go buy running shoes because my default instinct was just to go to one of the larger commerce platforms. So I think I mentioned earlier, I think it's a great time to be a consumer. I'm very excited about the rise of small and medium-sized businesses in this third wave of agentic commerce.
Just to dig in on that a little bit, are you imagining a world where like I can understand the plane ticket example, I want to go to, Ireland sometime in the early fall. Please help me find the best week, identify the best week in plane tickets. But are you also saying that maybe agentic commerce will enable purchasing things that I don't necessarily know about, like to the running shoes example? I'm a brand that I'm not familiar with, something I've wouldn't have even thought to ask it for.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking for myself as a consumer, and I think on behalf of most consumers, our search window for the things that we buy is remarkably narrow, given the availability of brands and inventory around the world. You just think about your own user experiences and, building on your running shoe, or example, or whatever it is. Despite the fact of all these amazing brands and small businesses and products that are out there in the world, our search window remains remarkably narrow. With the power of AI and with the proliferation of these platforms, users have the ability to search the world's inventory in real time. And I do think it's going to be a rise of brands that you and I might not otherwise have been aware of because of the narrowness of our search window. I think it's going to be the rise of small businesses, like I was mentioning earlier, potentially even different types of trips that you might take. You talked about kind of going to Ireland, which week to go. But as you start to widen the aperture significantly on the different places that people could go, the different experiences that they might want to go have, I think it's going to drive growth in commerce. I think it's going to drive growth in spending. I think it's going to drive a much broader, if you will, democratization of spending, of all of our spending on goods and services around the world.
Sticking with this idea of what's coming next, Roy, I'm curious what breakthroughs in AI-enabled clinical insights or complex healthcare tasks that you see on the horizon that you think are coming.
Yeah, maybe building on a theme of agents, I think the power of agents in the clinical practice will be really a breakthrough. Because there are so many tasks that currently have to be done that, as I said, are under time pressure. There's not a lot of data that can be put together easily and quickly. For example, if you're a cancer patient, it starts with the scheduling, very mundane. How do I get into the system? What is the information that I need to get to? When you arrive in the hospital, how does the nurse or the clinician have the holistic patient view, pulling the data from all the different systems, not only the EMR, but then also the imaging data, then also the real-time data? That can be done by an agent in preparation of the next step in the process. If you need to prepare a tumor board deliberation, currently it's an extremely laborious process. Actually, that's something an agent can do. And I think, therefore, reimagining the future of healthcare is kind of how you work with workers and co-workers being agents together. Because we just don't have enough staff. We will not have enough radiologists. We will not have enough technicians. We will not have enough nurses. So we need to reinvent in the care pathway which are the tasks that actually we can give to an agent to reliably support the practice. And actually, that's already being done now in smaller parts. And what you will see, this will grow in terms of which complete tasks they can do. They can do outbound calling. When you're discharged and you're at home, you're recovering, there will be someone calling upon you. Currently, we don't have the time to ask nurse to call you every day, every week. An agent can do that. That's not a problem, right? And they can actually exchange with you. They can listen to you. They can actually feed that back into the healthcare system to also, if you then combine it with monitoring on your body, actually to have a more holistic view on how you are. They can check in, but they also see the measurement. Now, that actually will trigger a complete different system that becomes much more proactive than reactive. So I think the future of healthcare will be one in which we can be really much more at the forefront, acting quicker, because we can actually put the data together in a better way and then act upon it much faster. But it does require you to reimagine the process, because we currently have, and I think that's the big change and the big challenge, we really need to redefine how we work, right? When you are going to adopt new workers in your workforce, you need to rethink how the team is going to play together to do the same tasks. And we have hardwired current tasks in processes, in IT systems, in standards, in job descriptions. So the real breakthrough in adoption will be actually adapting all of those, because then you change the system versus changing one piece of it and then injecting AI, and then, okay, if the person is open to AI, embraces it, goes with it, it will work. But actually, it should become a new way of working. And I think that's where it's turning to, and that's a very, I think, interesting phase, but a hard phase, because it requires all of us to do different things. Break through routines, and that's the hardest thing, especially also if you talk about patients, because you don't want to break routines with a risk for patients, right? It needs to be reliable, it needs to be safe. So that's a component which really, of course, comes into this whole redefinition, because you need to improve the practice from a reliability and a safety perspective, and I think you can. But then you also need, and maybe that's the last point, to be fair to AI. What we currently see is we are not always fair to AI. I'll give you an example. On average, a doctor gets his diagnosis right in 82% of the cases. We ask from AI before we adopt it in the practice, often that needs to be 95% accurate. That 13% gap between the AI accuracy and the clinician's accuracy is a huge patient impact, right? So we need to find a trade-off in terms of where do you put the boundary about where AI kind of can be set free in a safe way, versus kind of where you protect also patient interest, patient privacy. And that's, I think, where we are moving towards learning together with an ecosystem, and maybe building on what you said earlier, how can people that don't have access to the data set contribute? This is a real ecosystem play. As Philips, we cannot improve the healthcare practice alone.
Right.
We are one of many actors in the system. So we need to work with open platforms, with open systems. We need to adopt others' AI into our workflows, and we need to work very closely with regulators, with the clinicians, with the healthcare systems, and with other kind of companies that are innovating in this space to see what the best is, how we can move it forward in a more standardized way. And I think that's where we need to really collaborate. And that's, I think, the other piece of AI where people often forget, okay, this is a technical play. No, it's a collaboration. It's really a collaborative play, and the power of AI really comes forward if actually we rally around it together and not do our own technical stuff, because we can do that, but then actually will not land, because the system only changes if you change all the parameters.
I'm glad you came back to reliability so many times there. You spoke about it again and again, because I think that's one of the concerns that as a healthcare consumer I'm going to have, right? It's a natural thing that I want to make sure that these systems that you're implementing are reliable. How do you ensure that to patients, to healthcare consumers?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. We talked about trust and trust in AI. So, as an example, we had the National Academy of Medicine building an initiative where we have worked across industry. Some are in this room as well. We had Mayo, we had Google, we had Philips, we had patient advocate groups looking together at kind of what code of self-conduct we should apply in applying healthcare or AI into healthcare. Because what we also realize is regulation cannot keep up with the speed of technology. So we need to be ahead of regulation and self-regulate. So we need to have our own kind of rules, how we test, how we validate, what is the level of kind of rigor we apply, what is the kind of the practices, but also from biases that we take into account. So actually this is something that we own. You have your own accountability, you have an accountability as an industry, so the healthcare industry together, and actually by applying and living that self-conduct, we can make sure that this actually lives by the practice of good data. I will also give the other example. I often give the example of, say, if you are a cancer patient again, you're in phase 3 or 4, data privacy has a complete different meaning to you than if you're healthy. That really, because when you're there, I can guarantee you, you want every data set in the world to be used to find a cure for you. So we also need to keep that perspective in mind of the patient, that he also has a right to get access to the data of the world so that we can innovate on those data. And you can do that anonymously. You can do that in a way that actually it doesn't touch in any way the privacy. But we need to break through. And that's something we need to do in Europe. That's something we need to do in the world. Because the power of that data play is where we will find really the next frontier of solving healthcare challenges in the world.
That's an excellent point.
Matt, can I?
Please.
One thing that, as you're thinking about what we haven't talked about is talent, because I agree with, Roy, like the point around process and having to reimagine things, the point around this collaboration. But to reimagine, you have to understand the technology in a depth, because if you're thinking about in healthcare and you say, I've hardwired this, I've done this for years, we know this works. The doctors have to understand the technology, right? The regulators have to understand the technology. And, you have to have the leadership that is then going to embrace the innovation, right? And, when we talk about AI is hard, all of these things like rewiring the process is really hard, but you have to have a different level of understanding than you did in the digital era. And that is a big barrier for organizations. And it's also a barrier to building trust, because it's hard to trust something, whether you're a consumer, a regulator, a doctor, a leader of a health system, until you understand it. And there's a lot more that has to be done kind of at all levels of the corporate world, government, educational systems, to, really build in that kind of level of understanding. And at Accenture, we talk about leader-led learning. Like, we started actually with our leaders, because we said we can't rotate our business if our leaders don't understand the power of it. So there is still so much ahead to do at companies in order to ever be able to scale and to really get the value out of AI and to move away from what's often very incremental. And, companies ask me all the time, how am I going to operate in, 3 years and 5 years? And I'm like, the focus really has to be, are you able to do something you can't do today? Or do you have insights that you can't do today? And that requires a depth of understanding of the technology and its power that a lot of us, are still working on.
I love that quote. I'm going to come back to that at the end here. I'm going to ask you the same question about looking towards the future. One of the things that we've covered a lot in the past year and a half are the energy demands of AI. You sort of have maybe a different perspective on that. And I'm curious where you see, AI creating new opportunities for integrated energy systems in the coming years. To sort of take the, I think a lot of what I see day to day, especially in the United States, is is concerns about data centers, concerns about their power requirements. But maybe if you could talk a little about how AI is going to enable some new opportunities there.
I think the opportunities enabled by AI is endless, as I said. The only issues, you need to continue to train more people in terms of understanding AI. And I always say, you cannot scale without scaling the talents and the people. It's about creating value. It's not about eliminating people. And this is the model that needs to be used when you look at the future and what needs to be done. And I think demonstrating is very important, the use cases, because a lot of people question what is the value. It's not about buying chips and GPUs, and it's ensuring that you have the system, the data qualities. And people think that they can, by bringing chips and GPUs and installing them, you can create value. No, it's about also creating the talents and making sure that you have the data quality that will help you. What we think of the future is that we will be working with hyperscaler, because the models and the use cases and the pilots that we scale can be adopted across the industry. We can get to autonomous operation in the future without losing control of our operation or safety, which is very important. We are running in a business that is very accident could happen. So I think demonstrating the value that can be creating while maintaining operation control and the safety of the plants, we are running, and taking that with hyperscaler and also our planned investment now in the Humane in the Kingdom, which will help not only nationally but internationally in terms of data centers on all of it. I think the use of AI in every aspect of operation is there, but more value is not in finance or in translation or in legal. The more value that we see is in real operation, when you look at the way you are doing certain things, this is where we put the billions of dollars in our operation. You know, if you think about it, our capital program is $50 to $60 billion. Today, I have $100 billion under construction. Imagine the integration and the value that you can create across everything that you do by adopting AI. But this is the create for the enterprise, for Aramco and Aramco Group. But for the future, you need to see that intelligence in terms of running the operation scaled up across the industry. And this is, I think, we are better off working with hyperscaler who have the access to the global industries to scale. Because a lot of what also we adopt and we scale is not only good for the energy industry, it's good for other industries. It could for so many other industries. But hyperscalers that have access to all of these industries other than our energy industry can play a role. But it is all about creating the right operation model, the pipeline, and also the decision-making in terms of kill, pilot, or scale. You need to have a quick decision-making. Otherwise, if you don't have the right process to review, prioritize, kill if need to be killed, it's not good to pilot or scale, or even during pilots, you know, you need to make decisions quickly. But you need to create the right operation model in your establishment for you to be able to create the value that we are seeing today. And this is what we are hoping through working with hyperscalers in the industry. Accenture is a good example. You know, we are trying to group our use cases and see which industry might be the best user of them and how we can scale this across.
We only have a few minutes left, and so I'm going to ask each of you to maybe answer the same question, and I'm going to start with you, Julie, which is, so what lessons have you learned, especially over the past year, 2 years, about scaling AI that you wish you had known earlier? And please do answer quickly, because we just have a couple.
I think it's about human in the lead, not human in the loop. We will inspire people, and we will run companies with people, and they will have a greater technology landscape, but we need to completely change the narrative to inspire people to paint the future. It is human in the lead, not human in the loop.
It should be a business bull, not AI or IT bush. If the business is not involved, you can buy it, you can scale, but you cannot have it across the whole establishment. So the business needs to be involved from day one for it to capture the whole value across the establishment and the group.
I didn't realize it till 10 minutes ago, but I should have hired Accenture. what Julie said, it hit me like 10 minutes ago. What Julie said about leader-led is so true at Visa. Like, we went so fast by trying to democratize access to all of these LLMs across the company. I preached it from the top. The whole leadership team, we talked about it for about 18 months. And we didn't really see the breakthrough until we got our top 300 people in the room for 2 days. And we forced them to go through hands-on keyboard training, build agents, be supervised, be evaluated. And to your earlier point, like, once those top 300 leaders had confidence to build, use agents, and then lead their teams, like, that was the unlock for us. And I wish I would have known it earlier. I heard Accenture.
There's still time, right?
Yeah, I know.
There's still time.
I'm learning. I'm always learning, and this panel was no exception.
I would say spend at least as much time on the adoption as on the technology development. I think we're overexcited often by technology, and we're a technology company, so definitely speaking to myself. But actually, if you want to have it really driving impact, think about how you get it being worked with, which means that from the first moment you start to develop the technology, think about how it lands in the practice. So adoption is ultimately where success is measured. And actually, you need to design that in from the get-go. And that is much less about technology, much more about understanding the practice that it will actually serve, and actually how you then indeed rally the humans around it that run that business or run that practice. I think that's something that we have been learning in the last few years.
Well, thank you all so much. I think we kind of came back to the same place we started about thinking about outcomes and not just operations. You said something that I wrote down because I thought it was so great, which is that it's hard to trust something until you understand it. I think we've all come away with a lot better understanding about scaling AI in large organizations. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Buli di sekolah. Isu ini bukan perkara baru.
Buli tertakluk kepada perbuatan agresif secara fizikal.
Apa sebenarnya jerabu punca utama yang menyumbang kepada masalah ini serta kesannya kepada kesihatan kita?
Mereka akan mengalami iritasi kepada mata. Selain itu, iritasi kepada saluran pernafasan.
I love you.
Aish! Perjuangan cinta tidak mudah.
Apa suka-suka ni? Apparently, diorang dah kahwin. And I rasa ini cara diorang untuk dapatkan hak penjagaan Adam.
Just buat apa yang saya pesan, insyaAllah semua okey.
Zah!
Mampukah mereka mempertahankannya?
Hey, aku tak culik dia lah.
Kalau bukan sebab kau, Riza dah lama give up. Kau ambil Riza pada aku!
Minggu akhir, Pak Su Amara di Astro Ria dan Astro Go.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tehmina Kaoosji. Niaga Spotlight takes us through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Now today on Analysis, our spotlight is on AI and the future of women in the workplace. Asia Pacific is moving into an AI investment super cycle, with AI projected to contribute up to $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030, and regional AI spending expected to reach $110 billion by 2028. Now, companies are scaling fast. Today, 78% of organizations already use AI in at least one business function. Now, here's the tougher question. As AI reshapes jobs, wages, and leadership pathways, who actually benefits in the workforce? A landmark new report from 9x9 warns that for women, an AI participation gap is already opening. Women still hold only 29% of AI-related roles globally, even as AI expertise commands wage premiums of over 50%. If gender inclusion is treated as an afterthought, the next decade of growth could be built without half the talent pool. I'm joined online by Christine Fellows, co-founder of 9x9, whose research spanned business and HR leaders across Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and Australia. Christine, thank you very much for making time this morning. Now, your report is a moment of truth for women in the AI economy. I'd love for you to get started off by telling us a little more about 9x9 first, Christine.
Thank you, Tehmina. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. 9x9 is a not-for-profit organization that is focused on Southeast Asia. We're based here in Singapore, but we do research and we provide data-backed evidence around strategies to drive gender equity in the workforce here in Asia. And we believe that it's important for women and men to thrive and advance in their careers, but women have been left behind. So our research is supporting strategies that leaders can undertake to address that gap.
Absolutely. Now, it's extremely timely as well that we get into your report because, as you were referring to, gender equity, we all know about the long-standing gender labor force participation gap, but you're talking about an AI participation gap and saying that it already exists and regression has begun. So tell us in practical terms, what are the type of earliest warning signs or red flags you would tell CEO and leadership role folks to look for inside their own company?
Look, there is a risk that women will be disproportionately impacted by AI as companies start to roll that out. So what I would ask CEOs to look for, or for any business leaders and managers, is as they're starting to undertake AI pilots and starting to build use cases in their organization, have a look at the gender skew of the teams that you're including in those. it's really important to put governance across the workforce share and to make sure you're measuring who is participating, because really in an AI world, who participates is going to benefit. I'd be looking at training. A lot of companies now are starting to do AI fluency training for their teams. I'd be looking at participation of women, seeing if women are dropping off, because the data shows that while women want to learn about AI, when they're asked to do it in their own hours, their caregiving responsibilities sometimes mean they don't have as much time as men. I'd be looking at internal mobility, who is being advanced and promoted into AI-enabled roles in the organization. There's some real signals around that, whose roles are becoming more value add in an AI world and whose roles are disappearing. Just make sure that we measure what matters around that. And the last thing, and probably the most important, I'd be looking for, as you're developing AI strategies, who is leading that conversation? Is there a business leader? Is there a tech leader? I'm sure there is. Where's the HR leader in the conversation? They must have a seat at the table so that they can address workforce impact at the same time that you're looking at the financial and productivity impact.
So if I was a CEO watching this, what's the one metric I ought to be asking my HR lead, perhaps say come on Monday morning?
I'd be saying to them, you need to be in the AI pilot team as we're building our strategies. You need to be looking ahead at what the workforce impact will be from these wonderful efficiency rollouts and expectations we have from AI. And you need to be mapping future skills and what our skills are going to the requirements will be in the future, and how we're going to be upskilling our workforce equally in that regard, just to make sure that women are fully participating in 5 years' time when AI is all across the enterprise.
Basically, this is just early metrics and steps that can be taken so that the HR is not left to count how many women have left the team or left the entire company itself once the programs are done. Good. Let's move on into you telling us a little bit more, Christine, about this double exposure that the report mentions, meaning which women are underrepresented in AI-created roles and overrepresented in AI-disrupted roles. This is a clear, not just an emerging pattern, correct?
Yes, there's really firm data showing that this has already begun, and it's structural. So women in Southeast Asia and in Malaysia tend to be more aggregated in roles that have a higher potential to be disrupted by automation. So I think that the impact of AI across the workforce will be, roles will be displaced, they will be augmented, so there'll be AI-enabled roles. There'll be roles that will be created, as you mentioned, and also some roles that are protected. Women are going to be overrepresented in those roles that will be displaced, less likely to move into the AI-enabled roles, and they're deeply underrepresented in the new roles that will drive AI. To give you an example of some of those roles in Southeast Asia, the ones most at risk of automation are administrative and clerical roles, customer service, operations roles, junior analysts, any of the roles that require data processing, data analysis, data synthesis, data input. So, admin roles in finance, HR, legal, research, junior marketing roles. So there's quite a lot of scope there for disruption. They are the roles that tend to be more skewed to female workers. The roles that are the big growth roles in the industry are data scientists, data analytics sort of specialists, AI product management, AI infrastructure engineers, automation design, digital transformation leadership. We know, and I think you mentioned the data at the beginning, 29% of the AI roles currently globally are held by women. And that's a talent pool that people are going to start pulling on, and there are just less women there.
Absolutely. And what would you say perhaps is the fastest intervention that might actually change women's employment outcomes? For example, Singapore, on one hand, is also on the Global AI Readiness Index, ranked highest in Southeast Asia, as well as second globally. Is Singapore doing something different, for example, when it comes to this?
You know, they are taking a very intentional and long-term approach, understanding that AI is going to be a transformation process that will affect all areas of business, and it will be very beneficial for the economy potentially, as long as the full population have opportunity to participate. And so they're looking at, and some of the suggestions, I guess, for an equitable and successful investment and commitment, nationwide to AI, would be looking at where are the at-risk roles, where are the skills of the future, how do we provide training to enable large populations of workers to be redeployed? How are we protecting and developing learning time so that all areas of the population have opportunity to be able to upskill and to grow with the AI, revolution of the future? And that includes those most vulnerable, which will be women, who are going to be more likely to be displaced and less likely to be in the high growth areas, but also the elderly. I mean, the seniors also will have great opportunity. AI is an extraordinary tool that democratizes technology. It gives all people an opportunity to be able to use this technology, in a productive way, without the requirement of knowing how to code. So it's really important that the entire, workforce comes with us on this transformation.
Precisely. And digging a little deeper on a demographic, which is the Gen Z women and the so-called broken career ladder. Now, your report is also pointing to early career roles being thinned out by these AI efficiencies. Now, if that first rung disappears, who will be paying for that redesign? And basically, who will actually be ensuring that Gen Z women in particular aren't left behind?
There's a lot of conversation, and quite honestly, Tehmina, it's everywhere in the world at the moment around the challenge with entry-level jobs. Entry-level roles, both for young men as well as young women, are really under threat at the moment because of, a lot of what's happening in technology, and it's replacing a lot of those skills we just talked about. However, for women, it's particularly imperative that we find ways to redesign that first rung of the career journey, because we know that there are different challenges for women, and they're already having a tough time getting through that middle stage of career. So if we lose them at the beginning, then they're challenged to be found in the middle and not making it through to leadership. Some of the things that can be done, and there's a lot of thinking going on at the moment, with government workforce organizations as well as companies, around how do we rethink the entry-level role, and how do we redesign that, and make sure that women can come into the workforce and we can build a healthy pipeline. So we're looking at, hiring for learning agility and curiosity, perhaps, instead of, analytical and admin skills. Understanding that the investment
for the conversation so far, Christine. Sorry to cut you off, Christine. Thanks for the conversation so far. We take a quick breather and we'll be right back with the rest of the show. Stay tuned.
Kementerian Pendidikan bertanggungjawab sepenuhnya terhadap keselamatan murid dan pelajar sewaktu mereka di sekolah.
Malaysia dan Korea Selatan terus memperkukuh kerjasama dalam bidang teknologi hijau dan kecerdasan buatan AI menerusi pelaburan dua syarikat utama Republik itu.
SPRM akan meneliti dan menjalankan siasatan sekiranya dapat unsur rasuah dalam pelaksanaan projek Aerotrain di KLIA yang dilaporkan sering mengalami gangguan perkhidmatan.
Game is on.
I'm pretty sure it'll be game over within seconds.
Tariffs on imports of products from China reaching up to 145%.
Tariffs on the rest of the world are sitting at 10%, with the potential for reciprocal tariffs to be reimposed within 90 days.
Kunjungan rasmi Presiden China ke Malaysia ini menunjukkan komitmen kedua-dua negara untuk meningkatkan hubungan diplomatik ke tahap yang lebih strategik.
Kerajaan Negeri Selangor akan melancarkan program pemberian vaksin influenza secara percuma di 4 daerah yang mencatatkan kadar jangkitan tertinggi. Pemilik atau pemandu kenderaan asing, khususnya dari Singapura, yang gagal memiliki atau mengaktifkan permit kemasukan kenderaan VEP tidak dibenar keluar Malaysia selagi tidak membayar saman. Kekerapan gangguan perkhidmatan aerotrain di lapangan terbang antarabangsa Kuala Lumpur KLIA tidak boleh diterima.
Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tehmina. Today the conversation is centered around AI and impacts on women in the workplace, and I've had online with me Christine Fellows, co-founder of 9x9, a non-profit based out of Singapore that has just issued a brand new landmark report around this area. So we were discussing the impacts on Gen Z and in particular Gen Z women workers. We move now into looking at external hiring. Christine, so external hiring, particularly with regards to AI-related roles, is now outpacing internal growth. Now, many firms are going to be saying, we've got no time, we need the AI talent now. What is your response to that?
I would say, if you are buying all of your talent in to drive your AI future, there are going to be challenges with integration, with equity losses that will slow you down later. External hiring is also going to drive deeper equity gaps in terms of gender, because women are going to be less represented in that external talent pool. Alternatively, really looking at an internal first approach where you're ring-fencing women from disrupted roles, where you're looking at internal mobility and upskilling, when you're bringing your workforce with you to be able to participate in the AI future. So it's an integrated approach, but the focus on upskilling and development is really key.
Absolutely. So within, let's say, a 12-month window, which is also fairly a long time cycle given the speed of and growth of AI, what would then a gender-balanced AI talent strategy look like for organizations that are willing to take a look at internal first?
Look, I would start with leadership, and I would tie leadership KPIs to internal mobility and to development of their teams. So I would want my leaders to be making sure, firstly, that they're measuring what the gender split is between men and women who are going into the development courses and who are investing in training to make sure that's equitable, but also to be making sure that they're remunerated proportionate to how they are developing their teams. Also then, making sure that I'm identifying, potential women who I can move proactively into the pilots and the teams that are starting to develop the use cases around AI.
Clearly so. So there does need to be a really structured approach around it. Christine, I'd like to dig a lot deeper into something that we did briefly mention earlier on. Now, the report, which is also blunt about these self-driven upskilling models or optional, particularly after work AI learning programs and modules, which a lot of organizations are also coming out with, especially in 2026. However, these underserved women in particular. And what would you say would be maybe the minimum requirements that make such upskilling genuinely equitable moving forward?
Look, I think it is really important that we create programs to educate and upskill our workforce. However, making them available doesn't mean that everyone is going to have time and access to be able to use them. And so there is also a real disproportionate negative impact on women if that's the trading opportunities. What we need to do is protect learning time during work hours. Women have greater caregiving responsibilities generally at home, with the elders in the community, and they just don't have free time to be able to spend evenings doing self-driven upskilling and learning modules. We want to create cohorts within the workplace of women where there are sort of safe spaces for women to experiment and learn and share their wins and failures. We want to make sure we track who's enrolling, who's completing, and what the outcomes are of the training programs we offer. But I really do want to stress building communities of women within our workforce. And some companies have done some great work around their women's networks and having, female focused hackathons and areas where women can have fun and experiment and learn AI in the workplace.
Clearly so. I'd just also like to highlight the fact that based on newest figures coming out of the ILO, UNSCAP, it goes to show that around APAC in particular, women may actually be taking on up to anywhere between 2 to even 4 times more unpaid care work, including the whole gamut of childcare, elderly care, being part of the sandwich generation, particularly millennial women also taking on not just their professional roles at work, but also the unpaid care work. And I just had an extended ask on this same line of thinking, Christine. The fact that most employers and organizations around APAC and Asia Pacific are already pretty comfortable with having certain work-life balance programs already made available in the workplace. How can we ensure that perhaps these AI-related upskilling programs also make part of this landscape, and also ensuring that more women are able to avail of them? And just like those work-life balance programs, it's more often than not women taking part in it, men on a much smaller level, which also means then perhaps it impacts your workplace development and your career progression and promotions, etc., in the near future.
Look, the research also talks about women's measured approach to AI and to using AI in the workplace. Women tend to be a little more cautious. They're focused on the ethics of AI. They're wanting the company to give them clear guardrails around the use of AI before they'll use it at work. They're not as inclined to go super fast and experiment and make mistakes. And so these are all really positive attributes, ultimately, when we're looking for ethical, safe AI. However, the culture at work when companies are moving so quickly to roll out AI is often a recognition of who's fast and who's being really, who is most vocal and most obviously using AI. And so that also is not ideal for women. So there's a number of things to be done from an individual perspective. We need to make sure as women, at work, that we are, speaking with our leadership around wanting to be developed and upskilled. We're finding time, we're getting sponsors and mentors in the workplace, and we're building alliances with other women where we can form some great communities of women who are learning and upskilling and developing.
And perhaps some of these networks may even have to be rather informal in the beginning part of things. Moving into looking at measurements, your report also says that this inclusion, gender inclusion in particular, for AI should be monitored with the same discipline as financial and tech metrics. What would you say are a couple of metrics you'd like to see standardized across APAC to track AI equity?
Look, as businesses are starting to develop AI strategies and starting to evaluate what the benefits of investing in this technology will be, they're looking at financial metrics, they're looking at productivity, efficiency, cost savings, and those are the right things to be looking at. In addition, it's very important that we look at what is the participation and what are the equity standards around who is participating in the workforce, who's getting ahead when we do these AI, when we develop AI strategies, and who's advancing the workforce. So some of the metrics: exit rates of female talent. Who are we displacing and moving out of the workforce? How are we looking at external hiring versus internal hiring? Internal hiring and moving into AI-enabled jobs. What's the breakdown of gender for those jobs? What's the representation of women in AI governance roles and decision forums? Who's being promoted into leadership in these areas? You know, what's the in the employee surveys, which I know a lot of companies are doing now, just to asking men and women how they rate their own competence in AI, and just to understand who's confident and who's not in their use. So the key is we measure what matters. So we want to make sure that we're really looking at a gender split around all of the human metrics in the workforce as we roll out AI.
And as we look to landing the conversation, Christine, let's look finally at a little bit of the methodology whereby which you combine interviews, focus groups across Singapore, Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia. Now, there is a lot of public AI optimism, of course, but what specific insights perhaps could you share that leadership provided that may have indicated otherwise, at least internally speaking, for organizations?
Look, our research was in Southeast Asia, and across the board, there was optimism about the potential of AI to create efficiencies and productivity in the workforce. That was really across the board. The AI is happening faster than the people systems can develop, and so we use the term building while flying. There's a recognition for companies that they're taking on AI projects, and they're testing and they're learning and they're doing pilots all over the company. But there's also a sense that the people metrics aren't in place. HR are not part of that journey. They're coming in afterwards to retrofit. And there's a lack of technical expertise for them to truly be able to participate in that strategic development piece, which is really important if we're going to want to embed equity in our AI transformation.
Clearly, course correcting ought to start right now, actually. Christine, thank you very much for the enriching conversation. Your insights and the report, of course, makes the challenge plain. AI transformation will only deliver real value if gender inclusion is built in from the start. Thanks a lot for your insights. Now, in this AI era, workplace gender representation is a competitive strategy, and organizations must lead the way to ensure women have an equitable share in the evolving future of work. That's all we have time for today. Do join us next week for more economic analysis and insights. I'm Tehmina Kaoosji, signing off for now.